With that, I'm going to hand over to Karthik, who's going to be moderating this session.
Hi everyone. I see some comments. Okay, so we got the slide up as well with all the speakers. I think a lot of you were asking. Hello to all the panelists, Jonathan, Sophie, Tracy, Jason. Can everyone hear me well? I saw some comments around voice. Okay, perfect. So this is the last and the final panel for today, right? So I'm sure people are already, starting to get tired. So let's get this going, right? So so today we are talking about AI, in leadership, development, right? So we'll start with Sophie. And Sophie, given your experience of future of work, modern work, how do you see senior leaders, especially HR and IT, kind of shifting their mindset with AI, right? What do you think they are actively thinking about, from an HR, IT, leaders perspective? I think you're on mute, Sophie. No problem.
There we go. Thank you so much, Kartik. It's such a pleasure to be here. Very interesting discussion. And I will pick up in my answer from some of the comments that the last panel just made as they were wrapping up. There is enormous hype and excitement about the opportunities that AI presents. There was recent research from Upwork that said 96% of C-suite leaders believe that AI is going to produce improve productivity. However, at the same time, only 26%, less than a third, are actually these companies have AI training programs. So, and that is only 1% more than the 25% that LinkedIn's research showed from the first quarter of this year. So whether there's excitement, but there isn't actually investment in training. So, going off what the last people were saying in terms of like what is actually happening, helping connect the employees with what they need to be doing. So there are 39% of companies are actually mandating people to use AI, and just under half are encouraging people to use AI. At the same time, they're not giving them the training. They're not helping them understand how to use it. So you do then have an enormous number of employees, just under half, who have no idea how they're going to produce that productivity. And from my own experience and working with companies, it's kind of like, well, how are they supposed to be using it? Are they being given the time to actually learn? And are they getting the strategic direction in terms of what to do? So I think that leaders of all divisions need to be focusing on this and trying to work out, sort of step back and look at the strategic picture in a very an evolving market where new tools are coming out every week. This is difficult, but the research also showed that only 13% of companies report to have a sort of well thought through AI strategy. So are they on the right track? Not yet. And what is resulting is that over 3/4 of employees are really burned out. They're seeing that their productivity is going down because they haven't learned, because they haven't been directed, and they're feeling burned out. So what we have right now is a difficult moment where we need to really be thinking much more strategically, and both in HR, IT, and facilities management. Those are three divisions I see really need to be working together to make this happen. But it is across the C-suite that leaders at all levels of the organization really need to be coordinating and thinking this through very carefully.
Perfect. So, I think we kind of set the stage very well there. Why, what are companies doing now? And 13% is, I was expecting that number to be a lot higher than that. So given this context, Jonathan, given that you run a podcast yourself, how do you kind of see AI, playing a role in identifying the next, set of leaders, right? And, can you kind of bring up some practical examples where AI can be used right now from leadership training, development, identifying the next set of leaders?
Yeah, well, I think organizations have long struggled with trying to identify effectively, who's best suited for future leadership opportunities. So oftentimes organizations promote the wrong people, frankly. We often talk about the Peter Principle, promoting people to the level of their incompetence. So we often will promote, the best salesperson to now lead the team of salespeople. It's different skill sets, right? And so in a world where we're trying to create a leadership pipeline, but we don't always know how to create that pipeline, something like AI, deep machine learning, really provides us with a great opportunity to do skills-based approaches to leadership development. I think many organizations recognize the need to do skills-based approaches, but they really struggle on how to do that, and they don't really understand the complexities behind it. And so, and frankly, they don't have the technology behind it, and they don't have the the data processing power and the data analytics to do it, right? So AI really supports all of that. So if we're trying to create skills-based approaches to leadership development pipelines, AI is a tremendous asset to be able to do that. Another thing that AI can really be powerful for is scaling coaching and other kind of individualized one-on-one training, real-time training opportunities. We're never going to replace, human-to-human interaction, human-to-human mentoring and training. But just yesterday, I met with an executive coach. I do executive coaching, but in my university role, in my university leadership role, I met with an executive coach who came in and is meeting with a bunch of different executives, and that individual met with me one-on-one. Those types of one-on-one interactions are going to continue to happen. But if we're talking about scaling, that's really, really hard to do. It's time consuming, it's expensive. And so AI chatbots that are trained really well on how to be effective with follow-up prompts, check-ins, and other things like that, they can allow us to supplement and complement those human check-ins with all of the other stuff that coaches need to do and should do with the follow-up and all of that, in a way that's much more scalable. So now that organizations, they can say, hey, I want my leadership pipeline to be prepared for the next biggest thing, for the next pivot. I want my people to be ready for the next promotion. And they don't need to be quite as worried, I think, about perhaps the cost of hiring that executive coach.
Sure.
When that can sometimes be prohibitive, and sometimes it's only reserved for the highest level C-suite executives. Now that can be democratized, and we can provide that throughout the organization.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was just checking my email on the side. Like today, I got a cold email from Forbes Council about a coaching service, and I'm like, wow, that's a good coincidence. I think you're completely correct, right? Like, right now it's probably reserved for CEOs, CXOs, and how do we have a coach for every single employee, right? So, and I think you've briefly touched about the data. We'll come to that, in some time. But moving on to Tracie, given that you are a chief people officer, you've been working with many companies, what are some, examples from your own experience where you've been able to use AI, for people who don't do traditional, leadership qualities, right? Maybe, they are created identifying AI, innovations in company, things like that, right? Are there, some examples that you can showcase, from your own experiences across the companies you've worked with?
Sure. And so I approach this with a learner's mindset and very much with a practitioner's mindset. So even though I left the corporate world recently, I'm still immersed in working with clients. And I got involved and interested in AI really early on because I figured it could help me save time in my day-to-day, which it absolutely can do. But one of the things that I look at when I look at my clients, or I look at people that I work with in general, I'm in that mid-size space, so that 200 to up to 2,000, right? And even though, and I love all the data Sophie threw out, even though like 81% of HR professionals are embracing AI and using AI in some way, there's still that 19%. And there's that 19% is an issue because the people that AI can probably help the most are those smaller and mid-sized companies, right? And so particularly in this leadership development. So I've been doing a lot of work in this AI as coach, and something as simple as I'm having a problem with one of my employees. I'm having a problem with a coworker. I need to upskill on XYZ. And if you take the data, because it obviously works best if prompted really, really well, and if the data going in is good, and then you take the data that you have on your employees, and then you take this information on them and you put them together, you could really end up with a really powerful tool that can increase the learning of your folks. So I've worked with mainly people in truck driving roles, people in warehousing roles, and they're not meeting your traditional definition of leader, right? And so, and those people can be really, really important leaders, and we don't tend to give them enough resources. So with personalized learning paths that AI can create with the right data, with feedback, with coaching, with all of that, role playing, etc. Those are all things that can help really accelerate that process.
Makes sense.
And you asked me for examples, which we'll talk about later. So I'll bring those in at the end.
Sure. And I already see some questions. We'll tackle all of that in the end as well. So moving on to Jason, given that you've talked about HR digital strategy, how do you kind of see AI-driven analytics, right? I think we've talked about the data from Jonathan mentioned about it, and right now you have lots of tools across the entire company, right? From your customer success to product to engineering, sales, right? How do you kind of make sense of all of this? How do you make strategic HR decisions with this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for having me, Kartik. First of all, and I'm honored to be on the panel with a bunch of esteemed other panelists. When we think about analytics, what's so important to understand about analytics, and what's so important to understand about AI as a whole, is that data is the spine of AI. Data is the spine of any AI. And, I kind of laugh throughout this whole thing as we talk about AI because, Sophie brought up 13% of organizations have an AI strategy. If you ask most C-suite people what AI is, they can't even tell you. So let's not even talk about the strategy. Let's talk about what is AI. For all of you that go into React and do the little hand gestures like I just did there, you see my hands? That's AI. I know you're like, that's not AI, dude. That is AI. So when all of this AI talk we're talking about, it's really important that we start to think about what type of AI are we talking about and what are we trying to get to. When we think about generative AI, which is where analytics is going to have the biggest impact, that's really where we start to say we are going to be able to answer questions that we don't know we need to answer. HR analytics up until this point have been HR looking at itself in the mirror. What's my cost per hire? What's my time to fill? How many cases did I fill? That is all stuff that's measuring me. It's like me getting on the scale saying, how much do I weigh? Where we're going is what is the impact of HR on the business? Okay, instead of looking in the mirror, looking through a window, where I can say, whether it's customer sat, whether it's profitability, whether it's salespeople productivity, whatever it is, how do I take all of this people data that I have, and I'll go back to what Sophie's mentioned or Jonathan mentioned about skills, skills data, and be able to drive prescriptions. Okay, prescriptions, not predictions, not backward looking. Hey, 2 years ago, you know what the employee satisfaction survey said was, who cares? But going forward, what is the outcome? What am I going to get to? So I truly see that we are going to have access to information that we've never had access to before. That doesn't mean we haven't had data. I said information, and I mean intelligence. The second thing is we are going to work east-west across an organization instead of north-south within HR. So instead of working within HR and measuring ourselves, measuring the impact on work. And then the third thing that I think is so important is that we are going to be able to have conversations with our data. Okay? All of these dumb HR systems, and excuse me for saying that, are based on codes. Okay? They're based on table structures. They're based on table joins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which none of us should know how that works.
Yep.
We just want to ask a question and get an answer based on the data that we have and be able to drive outcomes going forward. So those are the three things. I think be able to look at ourselves in a different light and show outcomes, be able to focus on East-West and have conversations with data in human speak instead of HR speak or IT speak. That's really where analytics are going to come into play in a Gen AI first driven world. And the last thing I'll just add is that the technology is not going to do it by itself. If you don't design your process to do what I just said, you're going to be sadly disappointed with every single technology you look at and every single technology you implement. Okay? The technology doesn't do it by itself. It requires us to design for change instead of hope that the technology changes us.
Thank you for saying that. I think we can all be rest assured that we have our jobs now. AI is not taking our jobs away. And it's great that you brought up the point about analytics, right? And so recently checking the most frequently used courses for HRs and Coursera and Udacity and all, right? And guess what? It's like Excel for HRs, right? Because that's the single biggest analytics tool which every single person uses because all the data is there, right? So, and now that you've talked about integrating AI from east to west, not vertically, right? So, is there Jonathan, moving to you, right? Is there something like it's too much data? How do you kind of make sense of all of this? Do you discard something? How do you find the most relevant insights, right? What do you do with it? Do you just feed in everything? How do you make sure you're actually doing data cleaning, right?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Is there too much data?
Yeah.
I could say, having consulted with a lot of organizations, I would say historically, yes, I suppose. I mean, there's never too much data, but there's more data than organizations utilize effectively. That's really the question, is like, how effectively are you utilizing the data that you have? And most organizations simply don't know how to utilize their data. And so in that sense, yes, there's too much data. Like, why are you collecting all this data that you don't know how to do anything with? And it's, cumbersome to collect, it's cumbersome to maintain. There's data privacy issues, et cetera, right? So there's all these different issues. And I just wonder, like, why do you have all this data? AI is wonderful because it's so powerful in how it can organize and better understand the data. Of course, we always have to be very careful with how we train AI models. And so, that's always a concern. But I mean, one of the things that's been so fun, I'm not a technologist in the sense, like, I've been aware of AI and deep machine learning for a long time, but I'm not a AI practitioner in the sense that I do the back end coding and like all the stuff to create it. I'm a user, and so once ChatGPT came online and some of these other tools that were so accessible, so easy to use, I jumped in, I dove in like so many of us did, just to play around and see what is capable, like, what can I do with this? And obviously it's gotten so much better in just a very short period of time, and it's going to get so much better still. But the ability to take in enormous amounts of data, to sort it, to make sense of it, is tremendous. And so in the world of data analytics and the assist that AI can give us, I don't think there's too much data. But let's be aware of our strategy behind our data strategy and how we're going to be leveraging the data that we do collect, because it makes no sense to have data that we're not using.
Sure, sure. So we just need to be very, very smart about what we are actually collecting. Makes sense. So, and then, moving on to, Sophie, how do we even like bring about the empathy, the interpersonal skills, all of that data, right? Or does it not even matter given work is becoming more transactional? AI is making all of our work a lot more objective than subjective, right? Everything is whatever KRs and objectives and KPIs and whatnot. Like, does that even matter? How do we do it? How do we do that?
Well, I would look at work as being very, very different to that. Whilst the future of work arrived in 2020, which was primarily tech-driven, there were some economic factors, some social factors, but really very much about technology. Obviously, AI is part of that, and then both accelerated by the pandemic and its arrival, and then sort of supercharged by Gen AI as it comes along. At the same time as this technology, there's also the sort of talent counterbalance, because as Jason was saying, it is us who is actually using, who has to be programming, who utilizing these very powerful tools. And when we see how work has changed because of technology, it's no longer sort of linear and static. We can predict out very, 5-10 years time. It is much more unpredictable. It's much faster paced. We're having to work much more closely together. We are having to deal with each other in sort of close team-based, where we have much less routine work. Collaborative work increased 50% over the last 20 years. Non-routine work, because we've automated away so much of the routine work, has increased 40-fold over the last 20 years. So when the bar has been raised on the people who are using the technology and how we're needing to collaborate, how we're needing to deal with, sort of come up with minimum viable products and serve customers' changing needs very quickly, that has changed how we need to be working together. And so those empathy skills, those interpersonal skills really are in counterbalance to the technology. So we need to be sort of increasing our technology skills and our empathy skills, our interpersonal skills at the same time, because that's the way we're really going to be able to use these powerful technologies effectively. And when we're dealing, we also sort of need to be thinking about the pressure that we're under, the burnout that we're feeling, and how we're need to be sort of tapping into our empathy skills also to be able to sort of say, well, how are people doing? How's my team doing? Are they able, how are they dealing with the training? Are they really sort of understanding what's going on? Or are they struggling? Because those are the things now we're really looking at well-being because of, AI augmentation, but also all the other factors that are changing in the workplace. So our empathy skills are incredibly important now. And when it comes to sort of that time that's freed up, which people are sort of asking, well, what if I manage to increase my productivity and I get this time, what can we focus on? We can also spend time of really leaning into our relationships and building closer relationships. We don't have to be friends, but the more that we understand each other, the more easily that we can empathize and be able to support each other in all of this sort of team and project work that we're doing. And the last thing that I'll say is that, yes, I think it may have been mentioned on the last panel that AI is really good at reading faces, for example. It can actually help people empathize, but because some people are not great at reading other people's faces, or on a Zoom call, maybe it's a very sort of small space, but you can actually use AI to give you prompts, to give you to help augment your skills, your interpersonal skills, even though it's sort of technology, but it can be supplementing until you actually sort of have better relationships and can really sort of interact in a much more easy and productive way.
Sure. I love that you said we don't have to be friends, but we should still bring in the empathy angle. We are remote. We are around 200 odd people, and a lot of our calls are all video offs, and sometimes it's just very hard to really understand, without having a facial expression to read, right? But completely understand
Cameras
that point.
Cameras should be on, in my opinion, most of the time.
Yes, agreed. So, moving on to Tracie, do you think with, you talked about why AI, for leadership, how do we, get the data, what type of data, how do we make sure, what type of data, should we get? We should not be collecting for the sake of it, things like that. What do you think about, the leadership models, the leadership structure? Will we have more flatter companies, hierarchy structures with, AI coming into this, play? How do you kind of see all of that changing, or, will it even change?
I mean, honestly, who knows? There are lots of things that we can't predict, right? But what I do see, here's a couple of things that I do see with that personalization that we've touched on, right? I'm not the biggest fan on leaning on, say, a traditional leadership model for everyone. So I think with that personalization, it's going to give us a little bit more insight into people. And I'm sure there are places that are using that now, but and certainly doing some personalization. But I think, for example, my last company, we built these learning paths. That was a long project. Had we layered in AI, that would have been a lot quicker. And now we have the data and our employees, so we can take that, we can put those all together, and we can create personalized learning plans, and we can create plans for managers, we can create plans for leaders. And for somebody like me, I love what Sophie said about the reading of the facial expressions. For somebody like me who's neurodiverse and has trouble with that, right, being able to use AI as a partner to learn, and have, when I was back in corporate, have my manager, my supervisor, right, use that to understand me better. I think it's going to give us a chance to lean into that a lot more. It's going to give us a chance to get maybe more of our humanity back instead of
Sure.
taking it away, and understand each other as humans a little bit better than we would have otherwise. So I think there's a lot. I really, frankly, hoped we would be in a different place with Gen AI right now. I really wanted to create my 100-page PowerPoint with the click of a button, but
Yep.
I'll take what we have so far. And I think a lot of it's yet to be written, but I think it's very exciting. I think a lot of the skills that you need to learn AI, the skills you need to be a good leader. So I'm looking forward to see where we go from here.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. I think if Google and Microsoft and OpenAI have their way, we'll definitely get there. So, moving on to Jason, in terms of, we talked about data. We talked about how would you kind of get this going. What are some key elements, right? So, say, listeners here want to get started, with implementing AI for leadership. How would they, start, right? Like, what do you have some tools in mind? You obviously worked in Mercer, right? So, are there some recommendations? How would you kind of get this? If you have to sell this to the leadership of Mercer and to decide the next CXO, right? How would you kind of, do that?
Yeah, Kartik, I'm going to blow up your chat, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Everyone that's here in the chat, one word that you think is the most important skill to have to think and to understand AI. One word in the chat.
Yeah, we can. Mariam, can we actually do
Wisdom,
okay. Chat
curiosity,
is perfect.
discernment, creativity, curiosity, open-minded, thinking, communication, creativity, no fear.
No
That's
fear.
2 words, Laura. Common sense. That's 2 words, deep T. But anyway, yes, good stuff. So this is all about mindset, you guys. This is all about mindset. And when we think about leaders fostering a data-driven culture, blah, 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 it's all about mindset. It's how do we have a mindset that's open to change? And when we think about change, we think about the concept, Jocelyn, thank you, adaptability. We think about the concept of changefulness versus change management. Changefulness is opening the mind to change. Change management, the tactics to make something stick. If I teach people how to create a 100-page PowerPoint, like Tracie's dream, and guess what? In the back of her head, she doesn't trust AI. I could teach her all day long how to create a 100-page PowerPoint, but guess what? She's going to be questioning whether to trust it or not. We are at a moment right now where there's this concept of FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete, combined with the fact that you watch the media and I shouldn't trust it because of deep fakes in the political election, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to create a mindset that is open to change, that is open to unlearning, and it is those two things create what's called a digital first mindset. Okay. Digital doesn't mean technology. Digital means open to change. Okay. So when we think about that, that's the first thing that's needed. The next thing that's needed is, as someone put in the Q&A, to stop saying you're too late. Okay. Like, you're not too late. For the person that put that in the Q&A, you are not too late. Okay. FAFO. Fool around and find out. Okay. Go into ChatGPT. I have troubles in my personal life with anxiety. ChatGPT is my coach on the road. I'm in Denver, Colorado today, which is not where I live. Okay. Last night, I had a conversation with ChatGPT about my anxiety. And what did ChatGPT gave me some amazing tips to deal with what I was dealing with. Okay. I would have not known that if I would not have done that. Okay. I have used generative AI to actually have discussions about how to have a conversation with my children who are 19 and 16. Hardly children, but how to have a conversation with my children. Okay. The only way I've figured out how to do that is to fool around and find out. Okay. It's not, how do I say this? It's not hurting anything. You're learning as you go. Okay. But to do that, you have to have an open mindset. You have to realize you're not going to break things. And then I'd say the last thing that we need, Kartik, is to not make this an IT thing. Okay. AI is not an IT thing. Well, AI is a piece of technology, and AI first mindset starts with the business. It starts with the business leader saying, here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to transform my job. And then working with IT to bring that to life. But if all of us count on IT to stand up AI and all of a sudden say, oh, hey, now you've got a GPT. Is that a newest weight loss drug, or what is that? What's a GPT? No one even knows what a GPT is. You know, it's a generative pre-trained transformer. Cool, kick butt. But all that being said, we have to say this is a business proposition, not an IT proposition. And I'll just shut up after that.
Perfect, perfect. So that was a great way to end. Would anyone else like to also kind of add your 2 cents on how do you get started? How do you get leadership buy-in to start implementing AI in your own companies today?
I'll just reinforce and add. I mean, I love what was just said. Experiment, play around, try things out. Don't be afraid to just try. If you just dive on in and explore and iterate rapidly, that's one of the coolest things about these tools is, like, you can literally iterate like 100 times within minutes. So you can try things out and see what happens. And some things will work and some things won't work at all. And guess what? You can pivot and you can go a different way. And so sometimes prompt, the whole idea around prompt engineering, sometimes I think we get too caught up in like what that means and like how can we be the best prompt engineer? Just play around. I mean, play around and explore and have fun. And don't get too overwhelmed with, I can't remember who said it at the beginning. There are new tools coming out constantly, and it can be very overwhelming. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed. You don't have to adopt every new tool, but just play around, have fun, and it's exciting.
Perfect, perfect. Would you like to add something, Sophie, Tracie?
Yes, to add on both of those, I think when you're playing around and when you're experimenting, be sharing with other people. I just tried Perplexity. It was great for this, but it wasn't good for that. I use Claude or whatever the tool is, and they keep changing, they keep augmenting, and they're shifting. Some are doing better than others, and then the next one takes over. So the more that people can be sharing with each other, it sort of reduces the stress. It shows that everybody is learning and everybody is like trying out new things, and the sort of discovery process. And I was having problems on one thing, and it didn't count. And then somebody finally said, well, it actually doesn't count very well. So I'm like, oh, now I found out. So I think we can discover a lot of things. And I had been feeling incredibly stupid. And what was I doing wrong? And I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I think the more that we can be sort of on this learning journey together, the easier it becomes.
So do you recommending, like sharing this internally, externally, like inside the company as well? Got it.
Yes, across a team, and what are people experimenting with, and what have they found as being useful, and where it hasn't been useful, and what it is good for. All those type of things help everybody move forward and accelerated pace also, and not feel stupid and not feel that they're late, for example. But we're just all on this journey. We're all learning at different, and it's unevenly distributed, but we're all moving forward.
Correct.
One last thing I wanted to add, and that's all great. If you're brand new to this, and I was once too, and ask ChatGPT to teach you about ChatGPT, or ask Claude to teach you about Claude. It really, if you're unsure and you're scared of where to start, that's a great place to start.
Perfect. So we'll move on to the questions. I'm going to pick up my favorite question here. So the first one is, do you foresee AI agents having a board of director, a seat, right? It said board of advisors, but I'm going to change it to board of directors, right? Make it even harder. And, I think a month ago or something, Lattice was probably the first one which made news. I don't know how true it was, that keeping that aside, but they were the first ones to say we have an AI employee on our payroll, right? So what do you all think, right? What's a prediction? I think we can all agree it will happen at some point, but is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it 25 years?
Kartik, can I just jump in really quickly? That's not a good question. I mean, I appreciate the question, but that's like saying, are we gonna have a calculator on the board of directors?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, what's really important to you guys, and as after Tracie spoke, human-machine teaming. Human-machine teaming. That's what we're talking about. Humans are going to be on the board of directors, and guess what? They're going to team with machines to bring their best selves to the board of directors. There's not going to be an AI agent on the board of directors unless you call it someone that's going to sit there and take notes and help me do my job better. Like, hey, if I get on a scale and it says, hey, you need to lose 5 pounds, guess what? That's a little bit of coaching. Will there be some coaching tied to it? Yes. But the minute we start talking that way, that's when people start getting into this fear of becoming obsolete note. Okay. And I think it's really important that we as humans realize that our job is to team with machines and get rid of our jobs that are not rich and boring so that we can do the part of our jobs that are rich and fulfilling.
So take away all the mundane, things and then focus on the creative.
The hands work, the heads work, and the hearts work. Hands work is going to be replaced by machines. We're going to do the heads work and the hearts work.
Perfect. That's a great way of putting that. So we've answered that. 2 questions around specific AI tools. Not sure if anyone would like to take that up. Nice. Start Jason leave. Okay, that's fine. There
are so many tools. There's already been some mentioned. One that I'll just mention because it's super easy for anyone to just dive in and you can start to create your own chatbots. It's one maybe a year and a half ago I just dove into. It's called Poe, and Poe, it has all the different tools, all the different platforms that you can then build bots on top of. And it's just super, super easy to use. Anyone can use it. And it's super easy to at least start the training of your models. And so if you want to explore in a super user-friendly way, and even like, what does it look like to create a coaching chatbot? Super easy to do. Go to po.com and try out some of their, you can build a chatbot based on all these different GPT frameworks and see which one works better, which one you like better, etc.
Perfect.
I have a couple that I love. These are not free, but Kindred Minds, which is actually a coaching platform. So it's kindredminds.com, and then hrharriet.com, which is really that 200 to 2000 space that I love, that basically sits over everything. It's kind of, I hate saying chatbot, but it's kind of like a chatbot, but it sits over everything. It's great for departments of one, and it helps your employees, your frontline people particularly, just text a question and get it answered. So those are a couple that I really love, but they're coming out like literally every day. There's new tech coming out. That's super cool.
Yep. I think we'll have to do a panel on figuring out how do we even evaluate and which one to choose in the future, given that there's so many. So moving on to the next question, how, do you foresee, given that we talked about empathy, we talked about, heart, mind, do you foresee kind of employees trusting AI feedback, more than like a typical leader? Now you have, again, tools like Lattice, which are doing AI feedback or rewriting, rewording, toning it down, things like that. Do you kind of foresee, any of that happening in the future? And would, as employees, would we prefer that? How does, Sophie, would you like to take that up?
I would say that many people don't find giving feedback easy, and many people who receive feedback don't think that their managers do a great job of giving feedback. So I think, we may be finding already AI tools that are more effective in, creating the phrases or because they've been trained to give the kind of feedback that is effective, because they can be trained on zettabytes of data. They can actually have the language that is going to allow the key elements, the key issues to be addressed in an appropriate way, and therefore either be it could be that the person is interacting with the chatbot, or it could be that the manager is given coaching by the chatbot or GPT agent in order to be able to help them augment and improve how they're actually giving that feedback. So I do think feedback will be improving, whether it is directly given and interacted with, or somebody sort of says, well, I'm not quite sure how, what my boss was saying and how I should improve based on that feedback, and then be talking and interacting with a GPT in order to be able to sort of understand it better, or ask some of the questions that they didn't necessarily feel comfortable asking. So I think it's going to be very helpful.
Perfect. That answers that question. So with this, we'll end the panel today.